Hi, I'm Beck. I love books, and here are 10 books that broke my heart. The first book that I'm going to talk about that broke my heart was The Death of Vivek Oji by Awake Emezi. In this book, Vivek Oji is dead. His death has left questions and a dark cloud cast over his parents. The story of his life and his death are kind of told in non-linear flashbacks from his spirit and from Osita, his best friend and his cousin. It's a story about somebody who is struggling to find their true selves in a world that represses the very nature of who they are. The reason that this book has stuck with me and really made me react the way that I did, and broke my heart, made me cry, is because of the sort of emotional complexity of it. The delicacy of Oji's character and the damage around it and him was just beautiful. It was stunningly done. Be aware before you read this about the content warnings. It does deal with homophobia, it does deal with transphobia, it does deal with infidelity. But this book absolutely broke me, and if you haven't read it yet, you absolutely should. The second book that destroyed me, broke my heart, is Black Butterflies by Priscilla Morris. I have a little copy of Black Butterflies here. Here's my copy. I think this has been read at least twice. It's set during the Siege of Sarajevo in 1992, and the main character, called Zora, she sends her family away for safety, and so she is stuck in Sarajevo on her own. She can't bring herself to leave because everything that she has ever known is in Sarajevo, and she's in denial really about how bad things might get. She stays, and basically we with her have to witness the destruction of everything that she knows. Although this sounds awful, and it is really haunting, and it is a little bit about the sort of futility of hope and all sorts of tough things like that. It is a really difficult book in some ways. It's also about the resilience of human nature, but to what end? It hit really hard because this book is inspired by real stories. But the thing that actually got to me when I was reading this book was the hope that was in it. The imagery of the hope that was in this book and the connections that the main character makes in this book are absolutely astounding. If you haven't read this one, please try and pick it up. It's so good. A third book that broke my heart, but in a very different way, is Seven Summers by Paige Toon. I have my copy of Seven Summers here. Paige Toon is actually, I think, misrepresented in literature. She seems to be thought of as a bit of a rom-com writer, and a lot of her books are packaged in sort of nice glittery sprayed edges, pink covers. They are not rom-coms in any way, shape or form. They are romances though, kind of. This book is a tale of 6 summers with a couple who reconnect each summer. On the 7th summer, our main character, Liv, she meets somebody new. Somebody is new to her town. And she basically has this chance to see if she can fall in love this one time without getting her heart broken every summer, when her relationship sort of falls apart at the end of the summer. And so she has this one chance to see if like love could actually be a permanent long-term thing for it. And I mean, you'll have to read it and see and find out if she's able to have that love or if she isn't. There's just something about the slow build of this one. The segments that Paige Toon writes, where you watch the slow love grow after 6 years, and then watch her deserve more and go after more, but she still loves both of them. It's so beautiful, and the conclusion of this novel, it absolutely hit me like a sledgehammer. I was on the train on the way home from Inverness with my sister, and I remember reading this book and just crying and crying on the train, and my sister being like, I really, really do recommend that you read this one. Different from the other ones, but still broke me. Absolutely beautiful. The next book that I want to talk about that absolutely destroyed me is one that is very common. It is one that a lot of people say actually destroyed them as well. And it is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. It's a retelling of the Trojan War from the perspective of Patroclus. The story is about the story is about the friendship between him and Achilles, and the love that grows between them, and the drama that surrounds their closeness, be it family drama, be it the war, that is going on, and the tests that their bond sort of come across. I think that it's not the primary story of this that caused me pain. I've seen a lot of people annotating it really closely and crying really early on into the novel, and I'm not saying that it's not good, it's beautiful. But it was the growth of the characters and the way the book that was finished off. It finished me off. I know some people say that they do weep all the way through. That wasn't my experience. It was primarily joy, but there was one particular bit that always gets me at the end of this book, and that is what causes me pain. That's what breaks my heart. If you have not read this, it is so worth a read. I know it's hard when books are really, really hyped to think, absolutely, I'm going to read this and I'm going to love it. It's hard, but it is worth it, I promise. Another book that I've seen a lot of people who have read it say made them upset, broke their hearts, they cried, but I've also seen a lot of people who just haven't read it at all, is As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Katu. This is my beautiful special edition copy of this book. Absolutely love it. I think it is absolutely stunning. It is the story of a young Syrian woman who works as a hospital volunteer during the Syrian civil war. She has to do far more medicine than she's qualified to do. She's just a young girl, and she would have been an apprentice, but because of the state of Syria, the Syria that she lives in, she's had to step up to almost doctor level. And she is torn between her duty to stay and help the injured in her home country and the need to escape to safety with her pregnant sister-in-law and, only remaining family in Syria. And the timeline of this book is just absolutely heartbreaking. The reason this book upset me so much is because the character is so vibrant and you really fall in love and you really care for this character. You really want this character to be safe, to get only good things. There's also lots of war trauma depicted through the lens of this resilient but obviously traumatized young woman. The realizations that she has along the way, that's what stuck with me when I've been reading this book. I've recommended this book to so many people, to young people, to older people. If you have not read this book, it is stunning. Absolutely stunning and heartbreaking. Definitely destroyed me. Another book I've seen that has actually got quite mixed opinions about it is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. I love this book. It absolutely wrecked me. If you haven't read it, it's based on a letter. So it's a Vietnamese American man who's writing a letter to his mother. And it's basically, this letter details his life experience, his sexuality struggles, and an interracial relationship that he has with a white American boy called Trevor. It all sort of interweaves as well with the lasting trauma from the Vietnam War, the trauma that it's had on his family, the impact that's had, and the challenges of growing up as a queer Asian American in the US. For me, it felt like every single sentence in this book was something I wanted to write down and keep forever. Sometimes the letter wouldn't even be describing anything in particular. We wouldn't be learning anything new about the character, but I would still want the language. The language would still hit me. The language would still make me tear up. It would be really, really poignant. It was just, the way it was written just brought me to tears. It is not a light read. Don't go into it thinking, because it's quite short, don't go into it thinking, this is quite a light read, and definitely check your content warnings. Same with all of these. But it was absolutely captivating for me. I absolutely loved it. But it did break me. The least surprising book of all on my list is A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. If you watched one of my previous videos, my first video, you will know that this book absolutely destroyed me when I read it in the summer. I listened to the audiobook, all I think 38 hours of it, And I cried so many times. There was one particular moment in this book where, as I said, I was gardening and eyes were streaming with tears. It just, there's something about the way that Samantha Shannon writes characters, the growth and the losses the characters go through. And I don't know if it's because you spend so long with them, because she's a big girl, you feel like you're witnessing all of these things firsthand, because the characterization and the world building is just so good. If you don't know what this book is about, it's basically, I think there's 5 main narrators, but it's 3 main stories. 3 main intertwined stories of women from different cultures and areas. And they face this rising threat from ancient destructive worms that are awakening from their slumber. And eventually all the stories have to unite and confront the danger to the world, but they all have their own personal struggles and personal biases that they kind of have to overcome so that they can do this. And there's so much in this about becoming the person that you're destined to be. There's so much in this that is brutal, because there's a worldwide threat going on, but it absolutely wrecked me. It broke my heart. If you want a book that's going to tear your heart out, I recommend this one. On a very different level, another book that made me cry a lot was All the Young Men by Ruth Coker Burks. This is a true story. It's not fiction like the rest of the books I've spoken about today. And it's the true story of Ruth Coker Burks. And she is a young single mother in Arkansas. And basically she finds herself driven to the forefront of the AIDS crisis. She visits a friend in hospital. And when she's in hospital, she notices one of the rooms in the hospital is painted in red. And the nurses won't go into it. The nurses won't go in and care for the patient who's inside. And she goes inside and she figures out that there's this man there who's dying of AIDS. And essentially, she turns out to be the only person in her community that will care for men who are dying of AIDS in this epidemic, because so much of it was misunderstood and there was so much mistreatment that happened, especially in America in the 80s when this is set. It is horrific. It's absolutely horrifying. And I think the worst thing about this book is we meet the characters that she cares for as she tells the story. And we grow attached to the characters and we grow attached to her and the bonds that she forms. And then the characters have AIDS and there's no care. And she's the only person that is caring about these characters. And it is just, you feel loss and desperation and frustration and indignation right along with her. And it is absolutely compelling, but it will destroy your soul. It will break your heart. So if you haven't read that, I really, really, really must urge you, please go and read it. So I have a bit of a strange one now. Bear with me. Another book that made me cry quite a significant amount is Pod by Laline Paul. And it is a book about dolphins. And I understand that a book about dolphins doesn't seem like it's going to be emotional or deep. But hear me out. We do follow a spinner dolphin who's hard of hearing, and so she's sort of an outsider in her pod. But there's a tragedy, and so she thinks it's her fault, and she leaves her family. And then she journeys into the ocean alone. And she comes up against all sorts of different dangers, including other pods of dolphins in a sort of mimic of society, and she has to survive. And the reason that this is so hard-hitting and so emotional is because we learn not only about the brutality of nature, and not only does it mimic society, but we also learn about the brutality of humanity and the impact that we are having on the environment. If you're open to the concept, this book will never leave you. It will never leave you if you're open to the concept of reading it. Please check unexpected content warnings for this one, because you might not think that some of the issues discussed will affect you because it's about dolphins, but actually it really is heart-wrenching but fantastic. Before I tell you about the last book that I recommend that made me cry, that tore my heart out, I do have some honourable mentions here. And these honourable mentions essentially go to the series that left me sobbing. So some of the series that left me sobbing are the Six of Crows duology. So Crooked Kingdom absolutely destroyed me. I also have the City of Brass trilogy. The third book in the City of Brass trilogy left me bereft right at the end. The Poppy War trilogy, the last book in the Poppy War trilogy, cried like a baby. Also, the third book in Raven Kennedy's series, the Plated Prisoner, the gold gleam, etc. This is the third one, and there's something that happens at the end of this book. It just left me in a mess. I was just an absolute mess. I have no idea why it hit me so hard, but it did. And so I don't want to recommend all of these second and thirds in series for you if you're looking for a book that's going to tear your heart out, because you have to first read the first book and then the second book. And obviously you'll know the characters more, and obviously it's slightly different, but I still had to mention that so many of these series were sensational. So many of them really, really did break my heart. So, the 10th and final book that I've chosen to speak about today that broke my heart is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This is a book that I think a lot of people are intimidated by because it is quite literary historical fiction. It's a reimagining of the sort of unknown story of the roots of Shakespeare and the story of his family in the late 16th century. It explores love, loss, sacrifice, all of these things. But it's the way the novel speaks about family that really, really got to me. A lot of these books I cried at the end. A lot of these books, the climax of the story was the most emotional. But actually, in this story, there's an image that's sort of woven in the story to do with motherhood. And it's about mothers having ties, like cords that run to all of their children, and how they can always feel the children on the ends of their cords, and how they have to manage and hold on to all the cords all the time. And it was the beginning of the end for me. As soon as they started talking about that image, and of course there is loss in this book, and there are lots of hard times that his family comes across, I was just bereft. It was so beautiful, so enchanting, and so heartbreaking that it has always, always stuck with me. So there we are. That's 10 books that broke my heart. What books broke your heart? Have you read any of these books? Let me know, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.